On January 21, 2026, the United States faces a pivotal moment, one that could redefine the balance of power in Washington and reshape the nation's economic landscape for years to come. The Supreme Court is set to weigh in on two historic cases that will test the very limits of presidential authority and determine the future direction of the American economy. At the heart of the debate is President Trump's unprecedented use of executive power. First, his decision to impose sweeping tariffs on foreign goods by declaring a national emergency, a move that bypassed Congress and sent shockwaves through global markets. The second case centers on Trump's controversial attempt to remove a sitting Federal Reserve governor, raising fundamental questions about the independence of America's central bank and the checks and balances that underpin our democracy. The outcome of these cases will determine just how much economic power a president can wield alone, affecting not only Wall Street and big business, but also the livelihoods of everyday Americans, from factory workers to small business owners. Across the country, businesses and consumers are bracing for the fallout. Uncertainty over the court's decision has already stalled investment, delayed hiring, and left families wondering what the future holds. The specter of higher prices looms large as companies weigh whether to pass on new costs to consumers, and families feel the pinch at the grocery store and the gas pump. Meanwhile, America's allies in Europe are preparing for a possible trade war, scrambling to protect their own economies and questioning the reliability of the U.S. as a trading partner. The stakes are global. The post-war economic order, built on decades of cooperation and open markets, now hangs in the balance as world leaders watch the Supreme Court's next move. In this episode, we'll break down the history behind these legal battles, explore what's at stake for the economy, and examine the far-reaching consequences that could ripple across the globe. The Supreme Court's decision won't just shape the law, it will help define the economic reality for millions of Americans, influencing jobs, prices, and the nation's place in the world for generations to come. To grasp today's crisis, we need to look back at the roots of executive power in America and how it has evolved over time. The story of who controls U.S. trade policy is a story of shifting boundaries between Congress and the president, shaped by moments of crisis and political calculation. We must revisit the laws that enabled this moment, tracing how legal authority has been handed down, reinterpreted, and sometimes stretched to its limits. The Constitution originally gives Congress, not the president, the explicit power to regulate trade and tariffs. This was a deliberate choice by the founders, who feared unchecked executive power and wanted to ensure that decisions about the nation's economy would be made by the people's representatives. Over the decades, however, Congress has gradually delegated some of its authority to the executive branch, especially in times of war or national emergency. This trend reached a turning point in 1977, when Congress passed the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, giving the president broad powers to act swiftly against foreign threats. IEPA was designed as a tool for targeted sanctions, meant to freeze assets or restrict trade with hostile nations, not to be wielded as a blunt instrument in trade disputes with America's allies or to bypass normal legislative debate. But in recent years, the Trump administration's radical interpretation of IEEPA, using it to justify sweeping tariffs on friendly nations, has raised alarms. This approach sidesteps Congress, undermines the careful balance of power, and challenges the very idea of checks and balances at the heart of American democracy. Now, the Supreme Court faces a pivotal question: can a president declare routine trade competition a national emergency, and in doing so, claim unilateral control over the nation's trade policy, even when Congress has not agreed? The court's answer will not only resolve this immediate conflict, but also set a lasting precedent for the balance of power between Congress and the White House, shaping the future of American democracy for generations to come. President Trump's renewed push to buy Greenland exploded into a full-blown international crisis on January 16, 2026, sending shockwaves through diplomatic circles and financial markets alike. What began as a seemingly outlandish real estate ambition quickly escalated into a test of global alliances and economic stability. On that day, Trump threatened to impose steep tariffs on Denmark and several key European allies unless they agreed to enter negotiations over the sale of Greenland. The announcement was met with disbelief and concern, as leaders across Europe scrambled to respond to the sudden escalation. the administration invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, arguing that the failure to secure a deal for Greenland constituted a national emergency that threatened U.S. security interests. This unprecedented use of emergency powers raised alarm bells among legal scholars and foreign policy experts. Denmark and the European Union swiftly condemned the move, labeling it as economic aggression and a violation of international norms. Protests erupted in Copenhagen and Brussels, with leaders vowing to retaliate through countermeasures and legal challenges. The fallout was immediate. Global stock markets tumbled, investors panicked, and multinational corporations found themselves caught in the crossfire. This marked the boldest and most controversial use yet of IER by tariffs, a strategy that has destabilized global markets and left U.S. businesses facing unprecedented uncertainty. With the rules of international trade suddenly upended, companies struggled to plan for the future. The risk of political favoritism and arbitrary decision-making grew, as the president now held the power to grant or deny exemptions at will, leaving business leaders anxious and frustrated. The legal battle quickly reached the Supreme Court. If the court upholds this sweeping executive authority, any policy disagreement could become grounds for a trade war, fundamentally shifting U.S. foreign relations from partnership and cooperation to threats and coercion. The standoff over Greenland has become more than just a bizarre diplomatic episode. It now stands as a powerful symbol of the broader struggle over global trade rules, the limits of presidential power, and the future of international cooperation. As the world anxiously awaits the Supreme Court's verdict, the outcome will shape not only the fate of Greenland, but the very foundation of global trade and the balance of power in the 21st century. Alongside the tariff fight, another case threatens the independence of the Federal Reserve. The Fed's governors are protected from political firings to ensure stable, apolitical economic policy. President Trump's attempt to remove Governor Lisa Cook, citing disputed allegations, has sparked a Supreme Court showdown. The administration's broader campaign against Fed leadership, including a criminal probe of Chair Jerome Powell, is seen as an effort to force interest rate cuts before the midterms. If the court allows easier removal of Fed governors, future presidents could turn the central bank into a political tool, risking inflation and instability. The justices must weigh executive authority against the century-old principle that underpins the dollar's global trust. The outcome will define the future of American economic governance. These legal battles have real economic costs. IEPA-based tariffs act as a stealth tax, raising prices for families and businesses while stifling investment and hiring. Uncertainty has frozen business plans, undermining growth and innovation. Market volatility has surged, with global investors wary of sudden policy shifts. The tariff policy concentrates power in the executive, risking corruption and eroding the rules-based system that fueled American prosperity. The stakes are not just higher prices, but the future of economic democracy. Legal and economic experts are nearly unanimous. The administration's use of EPA stretches the law beyond its intent. Even proponents of strong executive power warn that using EPA for general tariffs bypasses Congress's constitutional role. On the Fed case, scholars stress that independence is vital for economic stability. Politicizing the central bank risks inflation and market chaos. Wall Street analysts predict the court will strike down the tariffs, citing the economic and diplomatic fallout. Economists warn that concentrating tariff power in one person undermines free trade and public trust. The consensus, unchecked executive power threatens both the economy and democracy. America's allies are alarmed by the administration's aggressive use of economic threats. The Greenland ultimatum is seen as an act of hostility, not negotiation, prompting Europe to prepare retaliatory tariffs. The U.S. risks losing its role as the architect of a rules-based global order, as partners seek new alliances and reduce reliance on American markets. Financial markets have responded with volatility as investors fear unpredictable trade policy. The challenge to the Fed's independence has also rattled global confidence in the dollar. Central bankers worldwide warn that a politicized Fed could undermine the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency. If the U.S. prints money for political gain, the global economy could face a crisis of trust. The world is watching and bracing for impact. The Supreme Court's decision offers two stark futures. If the court strikes down the administration's IEEPA interpretation, it will restore Congress's trade authority, halt the Greenland tariffs, and stabilize markets. Allies would welcome a return to predictable, rules-based trade. If the court upholds broad executive power, future presidents could wield tariffs as weapons, risking trade wars and economic fragmentation. A ruling against Fed independence would politicize monetary policy, risking inflation and a weaker dollar. Either way, these decisions will set precedents that shape American power and global stability for decades. The story doesn't end with the ruling. It begins a new chapter in the balance of power. The world will feel the effects. This Supreme Court decision will touch every American's life, from the price of groceries to the security of your job and savings. At stake is the principle of checks and balances. Will Congress retain its power over trade and economic policy, or will the president gain sweeping unilateral control? The outcome will signal to the world whether America leads through partnership or coercion. Weakening the Fed or weaponizing tariffs could damage U.S. credibility for years. This is a call for informed, active citizenship. Our democracy depends on public vigilance, not just judicial decisions. Stay engaged, discuss these issues, and make your voice heard. The future of our economy and democracy is in all our hands.